just have a minute. David, why don't you do your reading? Okay, and then we will wait for anyone else to join us, and we'll go into everything.
Thank you. Thanks, Marty. First, I'd like to introduce you to my newly renamed telescope. I've had it for a long time, but I just renamed it Vega. And Vega is the first star I ever looked at through a pair of binoculars in August of 1960 when I was 12. And this is the telescope that I've got here now. For my quotation today, I go all the way back to 1750 or so, with Thomas Gray's elegy, The Curfew. And before I begin, I just wanted to say that most of the interpretations of this elegy talk about darkness and depression. But the way I see darkness is not as a depressing thing, but as something calling to me, and it always has. To go out and to look at the darkness of the night sky and to see what wisdom it has to offer. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd winds slowly o'er the lea. The plowman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me. Thank you, Marty. Back to you.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. Hi, Rabbi. How are you doing?
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. And
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat
How's
shalom.
everyone?
good.
Shabbat shalom.
We have
Shabbat.
gone very far in our discussions, Rabbi. We made it to Exodus 34, verse 10. I just thought it was a little. We've come very far, as you see.
It seems like, yes, okay.
We may have covered part of this before last week, but I think it's important. We'll start here and then we'll work into it a little more. So if somebody would care to read, have to do our prayer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
So we are Exodus 34, verse 10. And
would you like me to begin the reading?
Yes. Whoever, it doesn't matter. And then we'll shift back and forth. Why don't you do, well, it all goes together. So why don't you read verses 10 through 16. Go ahead.
Okay, here goes. And he said, Behold, I make a covenant. Before all thy people I will do marvels, such as have not been wrought in all the earth, nor in any nation. And all the people among which thou art shall see the work of the Lord that I am about to do with thee, that it is tremendous. Observe thou that which I am commanding thee this day. And behold, I am driving out from before thee the Amorite, and the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land whither thee goest, lest they be for a snare in the midst of thee. But ye shall break down their altars, and dash in pieces their pillars, and ye shall cut down their Assyrian. For thou shalt bow down to no other God, for the Lord whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Just live with it. Unless thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go astray after their gods, and do sacrifice unto their gods, and they call thee, and they eat of their sacrifice. And thou shalt take of their daughters unto thy sorrows, and their daughters go astray after their gods, and make thy sons go astray after their gods.
Okay, well, let's try to unpack this a little bit. And first, as usual, any comments about this? Yes, Don.
Okay, my apologies. This is where I really always come up short in the history of the Israeli march across the desert, because Moses and the tribes left Egypt and had never been tested in battle before. They ran, they escaped from Egypt, but they had not been in battle. So far, they've been a peaceful nation. And now they're midway across the desert, and God is telling them, okay, I'm bringing you into the land of the Canaanites and the Jebusites and all the other tribes, and you're going to take their land, and I'm going to send you into battle, and you're going to destroy the people and take their land. And the reason is because they worship other gods. So that's number one disturbance for me. That this is the beginning of genocide, instigated by the Hebrew people. Secondly, looking back as to how the method of worshiping God, it suddenly struck me that it's almost entirely by sacrifice of living animals. And God never asks to be worshipped in prayer. He only asks to be worshipped by the sacrifice, by blood sacrifice. And then I suddenly realized that goes all the way back to Cain and Abel, because God favored Abel's sacrifice, which was blood sacrifice, and didn't favor Cain's sacrifice. So there's a thread of blood sacrifice starting from that murder right up to where we are at the present. So trying to keep this from crashing off through the fences, I'll just summarize by saying I have a terrible personal problem at this point in understanding how God is sending the Hebrews in to slaughter these other tribes who have been established in their land for generations. And I understand it's probably the core basis for Zionism, but I'm afraid I don't understand it, and I'm looking for help.
Okay. Any comments? I know Don has raised this before. I'm going to ask the rabbis if they have any comments about this.
It is difficult, and for anyone to just brush it off and say, well, that's the way things are, or that's the way things were. I think, along with Don, that's doing a strong injustice. So I really don't have an explanation. I don't have an answer. Just recognizing that this is part of our history. You made one comment, Don, that I'm not sure that I totally agree with, and that's that these other peoples, the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Jebusites, you said that they were there for generations. We don't know that they're there for generations. they just may have been established there, for a short time. But yes, there were local inhabitants. There's no question about that. But whether they their attachment to the land was well known or not, that's questionable. That's questionable. They may have been migrants, nomads that just happened to be in that area at the time, and so there's a frame of reference.
Mhm.
But no, look, tradition says that what we do and then what we do in the name of following the commandments of our God, that is always totally just. I'm not sure that I can agree with that, as you're saying, and it's a troubling notion. So I'm not sure what more I can say, but continue the conversation.
Okay. Well, that continuing the conversation is fine with me. I mean, thank you for that reflection.
Okay,
And
okay.
onward.
There are a couple of things that came to my mind before I said, but I'll let Rabbi Mary join in first.
Yeah, I also don't like all this slaughtering and killing and etc. But I stick to the issue that this is a story, not history, but story. And in the story, all these things fit. The other thing that I'm thinking is that we cannot, if it's history or story, judge values, beliefs, and what's important, what's the most important thing as we do today. Because today we also have some people that land is more important than human beings. And we cannot, I think that's one of the things that bothers me today is that we continue doing this. But the promised land, the land, it's difficult for us to think that the land is more important than human beings. And it's a very difficult question as Jews, to justify when they tell us, you conquer and you did this and you did that, based on what happened. I am, Rabbi Norman, an advocate of understanding that values, behaviors, beliefs, we evolve from that, and we are not stuck in that, even if we continue to do it. It's a philosophical question on, we do it because it's written, you're going to kill everyone that disturbs you and everyone that wants to take your land. And so that's always puzzles me, to take our behaviors and values and put them in the court of the story that we tell.
Okay, very good. I know Grace agreed with you. I wanted to add a couple of things that one of the wording here is that in verse 11, where the second half of it starts with God speaking, and it said, I will drive out before you the various communities. Okay? Mm-hmm. So God is saying, this is what I will do. And a lot of this has been prefaced with the comment that and we had this discussion before about God going to different groups of people, and he found that some of their behaviors were contrary to what he was trying to teach, or they would not accept what he wanted to teach them to do. And maybe this is a list of some of the peoples that he went to in prior to the Israelis, the Israelites, I mean. And I don't know the answer. It's pure speculation, but he's singling out these groups, and I would assume he's singling out these groups for a reason. Not just inhabitants of that along the way, because some of these do not live in the land of Canaan. And so I think that I think that it requires a little bit more information. That's all I can say. The other thing is, you made the comment that up to this point the Israelites were not tested in battle or anything, but they were. What happens to them after they cross the Red Sea?
The Amalekites.
This is the Amalek story, and so they're tested in battle already, and so they don't necessarily defeat the Amalekites because they will come up in the future. Always a challenge, and so I'm not sure. And if you fast forward, Don, into the book of Joshua, if you go into that, they really don't wipe everyone out. Okay, so there had to be some objection among the people at that time about this. There are good Canaanites that we learn of. So in that book, so it's not as absolute as it's being made. Yes, Pastor Bruce, and then we'll come back to Rabbi Norman.
Oh, just within this passage right here, what I see is covenant with God and not making covenants with others within the land.
Yes.
That's exactly what I see, because it says God is going to drive these people out. It says don't go slaughter them. Yeah. It says get rid of their poles, get rid of their statues, get rid of their idols, if you will. It doesn't say to kill them. It says to get rid of their idols and all the stuff that they worship. And to me,
in this one,
yes, in this one, yeah, but I'm just concentrating on right now.
Yes, on what's written.
But here's the thing that I see is that this is more to me about covenant with God and not coveting with others who don't have the same. I mean, whether it be value system, whatever, you're not supposed to be. The intermingling part of this seems to be the part that is the most important in this passage, the way I read it. It's the don't get involved with going back to the Egyptian ways or these other ways. I've given you this way, please follow this way, and don't get yourself messed up with these other ways. And that's just a simple American expression of what I feel like this is. The other thing I wanted to say was, what was read and what I see in several passages was I'm making a covenant. I think there's a stronger word there. I'm cutting a covenant. Cutting the Abrahamic. I mean, I see that word is I think Hebrew word there. It's a stronger word. It's a stronger word. That's all. That's what I wanted to share.
Good points. Good points. Well, yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, I agree completely with Pastor Bruce and the notion that this is kind of a refining of what the breach of what the covenant between Israel and God, and how it is going to be threatened, both externally and internally. The warning of you're going to be interacting with these other peoples, not only militarily, but just culturally and in life and whatever. don't think that you can stretch out the borders of our brit, not the land, but of the covenant. I mean, a marriage is a covenant, and there are limitations. Make sure that you don't do this outside of the marriage, even though there are the temptations, and whatever. And if you need to put up certain barriers that you do, and that God says that I will do for you, I want to protect this breed. I mean, it's a two-way street. A breed isn't just what the Israelites do; it's what God does also to maintain the breed, to maintain the covenant.
That it comes up again. We're going to be discussing that hopefully before the end of this year. Because it's sort of like, if I'm paraphrasing, but build a wall around this. This whole concept. It's not just a temple wall. It's more around the whole concept and the covenant. Protect it. And it is the way I see it. And you have to be very careful. But it does open the door to other discussions. And it has in years past. And I can remember when we discussed these passages before, the same discussions took place. And one of the issues is then you have if you go over to verses 15 and 16, as what Pastor Bruce was alluding to and Rabbi Norman were alluding to, but if you go to verse 16, it also suggests that if you don't protect everything, your sons and daughter will take wives from among their daughters for your son. Their daughters will lust after their gods and will cause your sons to lust after their gods. So what I'm, this sort of dovetails into the discussion of assimilation and the discussion of intermarriage. These are very delicate subjects, and I know Marsha is shaking her head, but we have to recognize that there are certain things you can do, as the rabbi was saying, and certain things be very careful if you go too far. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to go into any detailed discussions or anything, but it's something to think about. And I know that in modern times, there has been a whole new reevaluation of things. It's not as absolute as this. And I think that's what some other people have been, what Rabbi Miri was discussing also. That we can't look at the past through today's eyeglasses. Okay, our lenses. Yes, David, you had your hand up for a while.
Thanks, not that long, but thanks, Marty. I want to go back a little bit to something I brought up last week about the theme of jealousy, because we talked last week about that God is saying that I'm a jealous God. You cannot be jealous, but I can. And he is keeping certain traits to himself. But there's something else here that's even more important, I think, that he is not using God's kind of jealousy as a fault, but as a attribute, as a thing. And I think that's really important, and it's interesting and a little bit optimistic that God is honest with us, and he says, this is who and what I am, And one part of that is that I'm jealous. I will not be happy if you guys start building more golden calves and start worshiping other things. You can make other things. You can build a computer. You can build a house, build a rocket ship, build an ocean liner, but you can't worship those things because worshiping will just be kept to me. And that is the way I am. And I'm honest with you about that. And I like the theme of jealousy and of honesty as expressed in these verses.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, Don.
Yeah, thank you. And if I may, I'm going to circle around to part 2 of my earlier question, which was left hanging there. And to use Pastor Bruce's word, if you can cut me some slack on this, please. And that has to do with blood sacrifice. And this also extends from what David just said. God's primary focus is on blood sacrifice, and that's a form of worship. That's how you worship. And he doesn't want, he explicitly says he doesn't want the Israelites eating somebody else's sacrifice. So you're gonna sacrifice to me, and that's the sacrifice you will eat, and no one else's. And so now Marty, you leapt forward to Joshua, so if I may, I'm going to jump forward just briefly here. I had a week of epiphany on this, and so I kind of it's bubbling up inside of me. So and I'm glad Pastor Bruce is here. So I'm jumping forward to the first temple where sacrifices were made, and then the destruction of the first temple, and you couldn't make blood sacrifices anymore, no place to do it. And then Cyrus the Great restored the temple, and then another 500 years, there's more blood sacrifices all the way down to Roman time. And this is where I'm going to ask Pastor Bruce for a comment, because at the start of Christianity, where all the so-called Christians were really Jews, and it was before the second temple was destroyed in 70 AD, that Christ came along and said, that's it with sacrifices. I'm going to be the last one. I'm your blood sacrifice. You don't have to do this anymore. And then right after that, the second temple was destroyed by the Romans, and there wasn't any place to do blood sacrifices. And so since then, Jews have not done blood sacrifices, maybe symbolically at best, but that was the end of blood sacrifices 1,500 years after what we're reading right now. So that practice went on for 15 centuries, and that was the primary means of worship for Jews for all that time. And again, I don't have any opinion. I don't have any horses in this race. I'm just looking for commentary and help in understanding it. And if it's at a place, I'm happy to let it go until whatever time.
It's not out of place.
Okay. Pastor Bruce.
Well, you brought up a lot of different points that I have in my head going through this that sometimes I bring up and sometimes I don't bring it up. But you did bring up some of the things that I think as I read through all of this stuff based on Brit Hadasha and so forth and so on. But anyway, I want to also point out that there are, I believe it's the Hasidic Jews that sacrifice their chicken and throw it around the head. Is that correct? At Passover?
Yeah.
They do?
Yeah, but
No,
but that the
we also
purpose of that is not
yeah.
the sacrifice.
Which group?
No,
No,
It's
just Orthodox group.
Orthodox
But
group.
but
Okay.
yeah, but the purpose is not the sacrificing.
Oh,
Right.
okay. But the last 2 years, and it's been applied for a bit, as you probably know, the last 2 years on the, I can't remember which side of the east side temple steps, I guess, maybe. They've applied to do a perfect lamb sacrifice. The Orthodox people have. I know they've done one at least on the steps of the temple, of the outside the walls there. And they've applied again this year. I kind of keep track of that stuff because it seems important to me in light of what's going on in our world. I just kind of pay attention to things like that. But so in order to talk to you, Don, about your that this is never happening, and it actually has happened, not in the temple because there's no temple, but as close as those people feel like they can get to that perfect sacrifice once again there, which I find extremely interesting, to see that they are applying again for this again at Passover for this season. And I don't know if any of you even follow that or know that, but that's happening amongst the Orthodox there in Jerusalem.
A small sect. To be
Very
fair,
small.
it's a very, very small sect.
Yeah, I don't know who. I just know it's happening, and they've applied for it, and so forth and so on. And it did happen there on those steps, either last year or the year before. I can't remember. But per your comment, Don, is that, you know, as a believer that Yeshua was the Messiah, and that perfect sacrifice has happened, that's how I would think that way. You brought that up, and that's how I think in my spirit, that is probably why there's no sacrifices, based on that thought of what Yeshua said about himself while he was here. I know not everybody in this room agrees with that, but that's kind of how I look at it as a believer. But I think that when you look at the word sacrifice, we think about that regularly with Passover. Do we not? And do we not remember on Shabbat, Passover, regularly in the wine and the bread, just like a communion would be for us? It would be similar in a sense of just remembering. Everything is about remembering what God has done. And see, that's I look at even this as like, okay, God's doing this stuff. He's the covenanter. He's working on this. And we have to remember what he's doing and why. And a personal level, how do we get rid of our Asherah poles? How do we get rid of our idols in our lives? How do we get rid of this stuff? Well, you know, we can just let it sit there and hopefully it doesn't do anything. Or we can take it and smash it and say, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. I mean, we all have things that creep up that take the place of God in our lives. We all do, I'm sure. I mean, I'm admitting it. We all have something that takes the place of God at times, at least in our minds, if not our hearts. And we have to get rid of those things as they break down the altars, smash the pillars, cut down the poles. So I look at this as a personal thing too. You know, I believe all of this is given to us so that we can look at this as what does this mean for me right this second? What I get out of this one for this second is, if I'm going to obey God, or am I going to just go off with something that I think is more important? I guess David was talking about computers or other things that become more my phone that's not charging properly. You know, all those things take our little spots, you know, away from whatever. And I'm trying to ignore my silly phone because it's not charging and study here with you all. But anyway, bottom line is that I liked what David said about all those things, because the things that take the place of God in our lives is what I think he's really getting at here. I think this is what he's saying here. Don't let anything get in the way. Follow me. Follow me. I don't know. That's my thought.
Thank you. Yes, Rabbi Norman.
Well, I have to disagree with only one point that was made, and that's I want to make sure that we don't destroy the cruise ships. Okay, please.
Just don't worship them.
All right, but anyway, and I want to thank Pastor Bruce for his for his explanation there within his belief structure. But Don, I want to go back to one of the points that at least I think you were trying to question is at this point in time in the Israelites' experience, is their cult, let's call it that, only based on the sacrifices? Does that seem to be the only way that the people are expressing, let's call it worship? They don't have prayer yet, but let's call it worship. And I would submit that just as important, and once you get into the role of the prophets, it changes entirely. But just as important is the imperative to follow justice and to seek to be holy and to follow these ethical commandments. And those are some of the things that specifically and uniquely distinguish the Israelites. That's what makes them the chosen people. And the fear seems to be that if to use Marty's word of assimilation, that if we have too much interaction with other groups who yes do some of the same rituals of sacrifice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that we're going to also lose the distinguishing characteristic of being ideally an ethical, just society also. So maybe that's one way of responding to it.
Thank you. Thank you. David, and then Rabbi Mary.
Well, thank you. There's something that I was thinking about as I was listening to both Don and to Pastor Bruce, and this going all the way back to Noachian times, that apparently God seems to change his mind on some things. After the flood, he makes, I believe, the first covenant where or one of the earliest ones where he says, I will never do that again. And I will never cause another disastrous flood like that. Is it possible that with the idea of sacrificing, that at some point God decided that I don't want you people to be killing other ones of my creatures to sacrifice unto me. And in order to make sure that you don't, I will arrange for the temple to be destroyed because I don't want the sacrifices anymore. Is that possible? I don't know.
Good point. Interesting point. Any further discussion? Oh, yes, Rabbi Mary, please.
Well, we know that, mainly several people, many people believe in the 10 Commandments and not in other commandments. But in 10 Commandments, you don't have exactly the issue of sacrifices. Said, don't worship others because I'm the only God. And all the rest of the commandments have nothing to do with korbanot, with sacrifices. As Rabbi Norman mentioned, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, is when we get to the times of the prophets. I mean, Jeremiah said, stop this korbanot, stop this. This is not what God wants. And today I listened to a speech that someone sent on Facebook, and this guy talks about the issue, God wants you to be a mensch, be a human being, be a mensch. Because a lot of trouble is going on in Israel now with the religious and not religious. It always was, but now it's too extreme. So the issue of this is not the core of what I want from you. And I think that this comes in several areas, in several eras. And again, as Rabbi Norman said, other people thank God by giving. And you give things that are very dear to you. So that was the issue of the korbanot. The shoresh, the root of the word korban, is to come close to God. And here again, what I said before, Don, it's a judgment on a culture or cultures that existed in the past. So for me, it's a very difficult thing, but I just love Jeremiah. And when he said that, it's like today, people go to the synagogue and said, oh, I'm going to go $5,000 to the synagogue. And there they go and they do things that they should not be doing. So it's just that kind of behavior that it's not what God wants from us.
I like that.
There's another way to look at this, and I want to thank David for this this thought that popped into my head. Another way of looking at the sacrifices, every one of us would be giving up something in order to do the sacrifice. And what are we giving up? The best, the first. Okay, and that's going to be coming up again and again. Except what?
In this week's Torah
We can
portion,
redeem it.
well, now this week's Torah portion, where it's give of the heart, what you can, and if it's not the best,
Yes.
you still give it.
You still,
Okay?
right?
So
But that's what I'm getting after.
Disclaimer, okay? But give the free will, give what you can, and be exalted by your gift. But
Yes.
don't feel inferior or secondary if it's not from the best of what you can. It's based on
you stole my thunder. That was the next thing I was going to be talking about, because when you're giving up something, it's the thought behind it. Okay, that's very important. There are different ways you can give something up, and what comes to my mind is when you do that, one of the secondary effects is humility. If you give up a part of your salary to help other people, or you give up your free time to help other people, or and we have different words that we can use. If we give up some of our food so we can help people, what is the common word that is used? And that's sacrifice. We can donate.
Yeah, and
we can
Marty,
you're giving it up. Yes, go ahead.
Marty, what I want to, and correct me, all the English majors, the word sacrifice comes from sacred. And
Yes.
it's a behavior that it has that holiness into doing.
Yes, and that is the basis of all of that's something that's pervasive in all of these things that we have to give. And as Rabbi says, also of our own heart, these are like lessons to say that this is the way we should behave in general, be willing to give something to others as well as to God. Yes. Rabbi Norman.
I was at a function. This is
Mhm.
raising funds for a children's charity in Detroit, and the speaker was Sparky Anderson, who was the manager
Remember that?
first of the Cincinnati Reds when I first met him, and then of the Detroit Tigers.
Right.
And he looked at me when he made this comment. He says, "I'm not, there are lots of religious leaders here, but I got to tell you that a sacrifice bunt or a sacrifice fly is more important to the team than a
Yes,
home run."
good point. Good
Right?
point.
Mhm.
So it's telling you something that you're doing things for others, not just for God. Maybe that's part of the lesson God wants us to learn. If we find something so objectionable, maybe there's something that it's inserted in there for us to find that objection and to come up with a better way of doing it. He doesn't have to do everything for us. He's teaching us to do things for ourselves. And that is part of what I think is some of this message here. Yes, go ahead, Pastor Bruce.
Well, just going a little bit further in the Tanakh, we've done that several times today, so I'm assuming it's
Mhm.
legitimate to do so.
Sure.
I was looking again at the dialogue between Saul and Samuel in 1 Samuel 15, because there's a passage that seems to be quoted quite a bit from there, many places. And just to refresh your memory of the story, Samuel has spared King Agag from Amalek, and he's brought them back, but the people took some of the stuff, but they weren't supposed to take anything. And he said, well, I'm bringing this so that we can sacrifice to Adonai. And then Samuel directly looks at him and says, does Adonai delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of Adonai? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, to pay heed than the fat of the rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and stubbornness is like iniquity and idolatry. Since you have rejected Adonai's word, he has rejected you as king. That was King Saul's final straw that broke Adonai's back, apparently not his back, but I mean, you know what I'm saying? It was the final thing that said, okay, you're done. And it was because he was doing the sacrificial. He didn't follow God's word. He was trying to do something according to what he thought he should be doing, but he really wasn't following what God was telling him to do. And so we all have to think about, what these things. And if God says to give $600 to something and you only give $3, are you doing what God wants you to do? No, I don't think so.
No.
I mean, or if God's saying, go visit your neighbor and take soup to your neighbor because they're sick, and you say, oh, I don't really have time today. Oh, oops. I mean, if you're feeling like you're supposed to do something and you feel like God is telling you or prompting you, or however you want to look at that idea, and you decide not to do it because you don't have time, or you decide, I really can't afford to do that, then how much more different are we than Saul at that point? That's the way I look at this. But I'm just saying this all goes together to me, all these things that we're talking about here. So anyway.
It does. There's one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and we can discuss that too. I find it very interesting that in this paragraph, we are addressing sacrifices that are material, sacrifices that are in your mind, and also your being. And I'm going to now ask the rabbis, how does this fit in with the V'ahavta prayer?
I know that you're making the, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind.
Yeah, this one pack, because this gets
Right.
into all of that. That's right. And it's different ways of looking at the same thing. Okay, because lust doesn't have to be sexual. It can be mental. And hey, Jimmy Carter said it, but he doesn't have to worry about it because it was only in his mind. but the point is that when you start thinking of doing these things, that's one thing. If you talk about it, it's another. And if you actually do it, it's another. And is he appealing to us on multiple levels here? Is God appealing to us on multiple levels? That's the question. Okay. Yes, Rabbi Norm.
Well, I think yes, God's appealing on multiple levels because people live, think, believe, experience, make their decisions on multiple levels, and the Torah itself has, I guess we would call it double standard. There are different expectations for Pastor Bruce was talking about, the king. There are different expectations that we have for the leader, as opposed to someone who's just a member of the tribe, so to speak. So there's a recognition that we do live on different levels. There are some people that make all their decisions based only on what you were leading up to before about, based only on the heart, based only on the mental capacity, that only on their physical ability, whether to do something or not. And yes, ideally we put all of them together as as one thing, which is what Hillel says about the quote that you're referring to. With all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, means with all of you, but not everyone can make those distinctions.
Right. That's what I was leaning towards. Sure. Yes, Don.
I certainly thank you for that, Rabbi Norman. It seems to me that depending on where we are in history, we have multiple levels, or we get narrowed down to just one or two levels, depending on how many degrees of latitude we have in our comfort and freedoms. But the point we are now in the Torah, it's only a matter of days since Aaron and the priests slew 3,000 Israelites for the golden calf, and now they are much more focused. And I submit that the biggest factor now is just plain old fear. Like, okay, you want me to worship God? Yeah, I can do that. No problem. And later on, things get a little more prosperous, and I get a little more latitude of freedom, and then we get into multiple factors. But I think where we are right now, we're pretty focused on basic fear. That's what makes me.
Okay. Oh, that's part of awe.
Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, or should we move on? Move on? Okay. Okay, so we're now at verse 17. Why don't we go
Oh,
it's sort of like an additional statement. Ricky, could
Yeah,
you
I can-
read
yeah.
just verse 17?
I only got a one-liner. All right. And you shall not make molten gods for yourself.
Okay,
But you can make them
so
for
this
someone
is, it's an, it is that, is it because God might have forgotten to mention this before, and hence he realizes, oh my goodness, they made a golden calf, and but they were still, if we go back, they were still doing it to worship God, not to worship another God. Okay, so God is saying, don't make anything. By the way, Islamists use that verse in their religion too. No image of God.
Yeah.
Not just a molten calf, but no image of God. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
Marty, I, with all your honor, I disagree with you. The golden
Okay.
calf was not to represent God and to worship God, as we're talking about God. It was to worship the golden calf. It was not to represent God. It was perhaps representing the God that they had before, and that they thought that that's what it is. And in the Ten Commandments, you shall not make all this stuff and bow to them. It's not that you cannot do them. You cannot bow to them. And so that's what it says in my mind. That's how I understand.
Okay. I don't know. I was looking away from the screen. I don't know.
Suzanne was before.
Okay, Suzanne, you're on.
I see this verse as directed to Aaron, because Aaron was the one that gave that foolish excuse. Oh, they collected the jewelry and out popped the golden calf. I mean, who is he kidding? And this way, God is underscoring. There's no popping out of anything that from any kind of molten thing, and so that he would not accept that excuse ever. Not that he accepted it the first time, but I think it's an underscore in reference to Aaron's foolish statement regarding
Okay.
golden calf.
Good point. Good point. I hadn't thought of that. That is very important. Yes. Rabbi Norman.
Yeah, I like that it's specifically directed to Aaron. That's number one. Number two is that I think this is kind of like the exclamation mark at the end of the whole paragraph. I think verse 17 is linked with the rest of it. The molten, the molten God is a specific reference to the golden calf. Okay, that and lest you be thinking that, oh no, we would never do that, we would never do that, we would never do that. God says, hey, wait a minute, remember, don't do that. And interesting, Ricky was the one who read the English. Ricky, in verse 17, does it start with the word and? Because I question where they came up with the and.
No, there's no and in.
Oh,
in
because you said and.
Did I?
Yes, you did. And that's
You can
immediately I'm
move
looking at the Hebrew and said, there's no and there. So I
But-
was wondering how your translation justified it, but I guess
Well,
they
no,
didn't.
it didn't. But you said that frequently I make a midrash by how I read something.
Well, of course, we all do.
It's what I stressed.
Yeah.
I don't know why
Okay.
I.
Okay, yes, Pastor Bruce.
One of the study Bibles that I have is the Archaeological Study Bible, which is full of absolutely wonderful things that have to do with what we're talking about right now. And the other interesting exclamation point, like Rabbi Norman just said, is that one of the groups up here that is listed is the Hittites. There's a lot of information about the Hittites in the cuneiform texts. And they did a lot, and that was the late Bronze Age. They did a lot of metal gods in their rituals, in their temples, and how they did things. And so just because when I look at themselves metal gods, I started researching in the archaeological Bible here for just a second, and it really has a whole bunch to do with how the Hittites had lots of metal gods, many of them in their temples and in how they did things. And especially at that particular time, they were establishing a new temple for the goddess of the night during that particular time frame. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Goddess of the night. You know,
They heard
here.
David's opening poem.
Well,
Yes.
that's goddess of the night. I didn't even think about that. Anyway, but I just found that an interesting point, because if that was happening then, and this was happening, then I can see why the exclamation point needed to be there. Was you're going to see all these metal gods over here. Don't do
Yes.
that. Idea.
You better be the strong one.
Okay.
Good
Take
point.
that out.
Good point. I just want to take us back to Exodus 32, verses 4 through 6. And it says, I'll read it here in the translation. This he took, it's referring to Aaron. This he took from them, the gold and such, and cast in a mold and made it into a molten calf. And they exclaimed, This is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Now, it is not in the book here. It does not say it use God with a capital G. It's a small letter G. When with the word of God there. And when Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron announced, Tomorrow shall be a festival to the Lord. So that's where I got what I thought was that the worshiping ceremony and everything with the calf was related to the fact that the people had substituted the calf for God, but still worshiping God in a way through the idol, if you will. Now, God said absolutely no idols, but so that's why I said the intent of the people was it's a substitute for worshiping God. So I'm not sure, but I understand where Rabbi Miri is coming from. So what God is saying, you hear my interpretation of verse 17. You don't need to make an idol to worship me. Okay, you shouldn't do that, because and this also dovetails into Spinoza when the rabbis are concerned about that if God, when Spinoza says that God is in everything, and they became very much afraid that people would start worshiping various animals, plants, things like that as well.
11.
Yes,
May
Rabbi
you
Miri.
repeat that, please?
I just want to remind something that we tend to ignore or forget about it. When Bnei Israel, when we were in Egypt and talked to Pharaoh, the claim of Moshe is, let us go and pray for our God. So it seems like the people of Israel, while they were in Egypt, had to go outside the group of the Egyptians. And I am almost sure that the word the sacrifice came there as well. But it was worshiping some kind of God at that time, not even at the time that the Ten Commandments were given, or the time that Dawn says that this is no good. So the issue of korbanot, the issue of worshiping in a different way instead of an abstract God, seems to be something that was embedded in the people's nations of that time. So I'm not going to talk anymore about sacrifices, but it come again and again in all kind of way. And if you go even further, the reason that Abel kills Cain is because Abel's sacrifice was accepted by God, and Cain was not very happy about it.
That's right. That's what Don was alluding to. That's right. Yes, Don.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rabbi Mary, and it makes me remember that the purpose of worshiping God in the end is to dictate how we behave toward each other. You know, and without the authority of God, it's anarchy. Everybody does their own thing, and it becomes impossible to have a civilization. So the question is, does a golden calf have enough authority to get people to line up and do the right thing? Or does it take God to do that? And you know, I'll go with the latter. Because I don't have enough internal willpower, even though I know what the right thing is, I don't have enough internal willpower to do it. So I keep coming back to my authority, which is God. So.
One other question that I had forgotten to ask before that popped into my mind. I had thought about this before also. In Egypt, they worshiped bulls. We had discussed this before. They had idols made of gold that depicted bulls, right? Golden calf. Now, they don't say it is a female or a male calf, okay? But it's one step away from going back and worshiping a bull. Could that have been going through God's mind? He had just done battle with those gods, okay? And what did the cattle, the story, the plague that befalls the cattle. So it's something to think about. That maybe, we shouldn't always do this. I tend to do this with everyone, but try to put myself into their mind. Why are they saying this? Why are they doing something? And I come up with different ideas of different reasonings that could be going on in their mind. And could this be a form of saying, hey, I did this once before for you, and here you're reverting back to what I was challenging and what I fought for, fought against for you, and here you're reverting back to this. And then maybe that was why God was getting angry too. I don't know. I just toss out another possibility. Any other ideas about this before we move on to the next subject?
Susan, you are angry at Aaron, and let me tell you that Aaron gets punished.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I know. It's not so much that I was angry with him. To me, he acted like a little kid whose hand was caught in the cookie jar, and he just said something stupid. Not that we all haven't done that somewhere along the way. I just, for me, biblical verses generally do not have just one meaning. I find the words in general are carefully chosen to deliver a lot of punch and impact. And there's often two or more meanings to any particular verse. Not in every single case, and I just think that verse 17 is one such verse.
Good point.
Yeah, I sort of jokingly said after I finished reading it, you shall not make mold, and I left off the word "and" this time. Okay, you shall not make molten gods for yourself. And then I jokingly said, but yeah, you can make it for somebody else. You can make it for a neighbor. So.
Shalom.
Oh, God. Okay. Ricky, why don't you pick up on verse 18?
Sure.
Elaine, Marty.
I'm sorry, Helene. Yes.
Trying to get your attention.
Sorry. Okay. I just noticed her hand. Yes, Helene.
Oh, Shabbat Shalom. Those are the words that give me peace. Those are the words that says honor and respect, words from God. And if you're sure that God is saying these words, like Passover, are you sure that Passover is God's word? Are you? Well, then you're all set. Are you sure the 10 Commandments are God's word? Then you're set. We don't have to keep aggravating ourselves. Listen to God and then open your heart.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You always add something to each one of our sessions, and I really appreciate them, Helene.
I do the best I can, and I have to leave. And I thank you for being so brilliant. All of you are amazing people, so brilliant, so kind, and so understanding. And I keep coming back to myself and saying, Helene, listen, for you and for me and for them. If God wants this to work, it's going to work. If God doesn't want it to work, we're going to have to find a way to make it work because that's what he wants. So let's get to work. Okay? I have to leave. I'm sorry. Bye-bye.
Be well, Helene. We'll talk to you soon.
Be good.
All right, we ready?
Okay, Ricky, if you would just read verse 18.
Just the one, okay. I was trying not to add any extra words. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, eating unleavened bread for 7 days, as I have commanded you, at the set time of the month of Abib, for in the month of Abib you went forth from Egypt.
Okay, any comments?
Mm,
Well, I'll start it just by pointing out, because you can't tell it from the English, that it's written in the singular. Okay,
ah,
that this is that this is a mitzvah, this is a celebration, this is an observance for each individual.
Very good point.
okay.
Did you, any other comment about the month of Nisan?
Well,
Anyone?
if it's in the singular, how come it's like a holiday that is always celebrated with family, and part of it is you will tell your sons, so therefore there's more than one person whenever you are.
No, the mitzvah of Passover here is to eat only unleavened bread for 7 days. Or
Okay.
I shouldn't say, oh, I did a Ricky. I shouldn't say only. Okay, it's it's that you must eat unleavened bread, right?
Right,
Okay,
right.
for 7 days. That we haven't gotten anything to about tell your son, tell your children, invite
Yeah.
everyone who is hungry, come and eat. This is just the mitzvah right here is in the singular, which means every individual. It's an obligation for every individual.
Very good.
Well, does the other come later?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's in the
Yeah.
Torah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But right.
Okay, yes, Suzanne.
Yeah, I have a question for the rabbis, and this has always confused me. Passover is the Passover meal on the, how do I want to say this? They're supposed to, the Israelites were supposed to take a bit of a young lamb or possibly a goat, I guess, and then keep it with them for 4 days and then slaughter it for the Passover meal. Is that
In anticipation of, yes.
okay? So the Passover meal is the 4th day. Is that right?
No, you start the days in preparation for the Passover.
Okay, so when you guys do the Passover supper, like say at the temple,
The Seder, yeah.
the
Seder.
Seder, thank you. I'm sorry, I lost the word. Is that on day 1 or is that on day 4?
No, day one.
Day 1, okay. Is there any special celebration for day 4? When
No.
the slaughter of the lamb,
No, day one and day 7 are the special observances. The only like preparing the lamb, slaughtering the lamb, cleaning out the house, making sure there's no leavened products in the house. Those are all done before the first day.
before day 1.
Right,
Yeah.
before day 1, which actually is evening 1 into day.
Right, because the calendar.
Right.
Okay.
And
Okay.
there's one other I will mention because it's something that I observe and resonate with it, and that's that the Erev Pesach, the 24 hours before the first Seder is and this is also going to lead us into the next verse, but is a fast of the firstborn. Every firstborn son traditionally fasts also in recognition of the death of all the firstborn sons of Egypt.
And that's the evening before day 1?
Yeah, in anticipation.
Station. Oh, I
Right.
never heard of that.
Everyone's supposed to avoid eating matzah or unleavened products for the 24 hours before, and firstborn sons traditionally are supposed to fast
Oh, I see. Okay.
the day before. Right.
Oh, okay. Okay. Because, well,
That doesn't come from the Torah, incidentally. That's a custom.
oh, a custom. Okay. Because I always I mean, the crucifixion is in the Last Supper somehow supposed to coordinate with Passover, and I've just never been able to understand it or figure it out. And
Well,
so now I have more to think about, and I guess I'll
Okay,
have to
all right.
pass to Bruce. But thank you. You helped. It did help.
and then the Last Supper was a Seder,
Probably.
probably. Yeah,
Probably.
well,
Probably. Yeah. See, I was thinking that the Passover Seder wasn't until the lamb was killed, but that's wrong.
the lamb
Yeah,
was killed.
the lamb is slaughtered in anticipation
Yeah.
of the festival.
Right. Okay.
-4.
Pardon me, Ricky?
Day -4.
I heard the
Okay.
-4, but I didn't hear
I'm
the.
saying.
Okay. All right. Well, anyways, thank you for answering my question.
Okay. Rabbi, I have forgotten.
Marcia.
Marcia has her.
What Suzanne made me think of is that there were earlier on in the book of that we read, aren't there two special days, one for the Paschal lamb and one for the bread, the matzah?
Right.
Could you say
Yeah,
something about
this
that?
this is the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Right.
Okay. All right. And then the Pesach, the Paschal
Right.
Lamb, which is the climactic slaughtering of that Suzanne's referring to is the day that leads up to so it really there's two, but they are two separate. There wasn't any ritual with the Pesach, with the Paschal
Right.
Day. It's been superseded by the events of the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Right. That's what my understanding, and maybe that
Right.
I don't know if Suzanne was alluding to both of those. Yes, Marcia.
I don't know where this came from, but in my family, there was a thought that certain males did not have to not eat that day if there was something else before it. And like you were the firstborn, or you were this, or you were that. But for some reason, they told me that my son didn't have to fast because ... And the ... has disappeared. No, nobody knows. Okay.
The tradition that, as I know it, is only for the firstborn son. Now, others can choose to observe that custom. Minhag, you can always add on to your observance and celebration, but the tradition was that the firstborn sons should fast.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll have to go back into my mind and find the person who told me that he didn't have to. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Very interesting.
honestly speaking, unless there are medical reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
If the good doctor says no, you should not be fasting because you're taking medicines or whatever it might be, then your health comes first.
Right.
So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know.
Well, Ricky, since Marcia brought up some of the firstborn, would you like to read verse 19 and 20?
Sure. Every first issue of the womb is mine, with a capital M, from all your livestock that drop a male as firstling, whether cattle or sheep. But the firstling of an ass you shall redeem with a sheep. If you do not redeem it, you must break its neck, and you must redeem every firstborn among your sons.
Okay.
You got the last
Comments.
first. Cattle. I don't understand why the ass gets redeemed by a sheep, and it does the animals first before it gets to the human firstborns. Break its neck.
Yeah.
That
Well,
sounds
if
like the
someone wants
chicken
to
we were
start doing
talking
some
about.
of the research into the Mishnah, I can help them find exactly where the passages would be. But this is not.
Okay, you're giving yourself a homework assignment, but so it was. So you had to. Now, I have forgotten. What is the difference between a mule and an ass?
A what?
Oh,
A mule.
Oh, right,
A
right,
do-
right.
A mule is part horse,
Yeah,
and the ass
and
is purely donkey.
That's right.
and it's sterile. It won't reproduce.
That's the mule.
Yeah, that's the mule.
Okay.
That's
But there
why.
have been confusion at the time. We learned that sheep and goat at one point are intermingled. They call the same creature at one point in our readings. And we discussed that several years back. Anyway, so was there any confusion at that time between the two? But I don't know.
Last time. Well, wait a minute. I'm 20, but the firstling of an ass you shall redeem with a sheep. But we've run out of firstborn sheep if we satisfy verse 19.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a second-born sheep, any sheep.
I don't know. It struck me. It's a little unusual. Why the ass? Is he saving the ass for Balaam's story? I don't know.
Well, but the thing is, you've always been redeeming with the first issue of the womb is mine.
Right.
But the ass you redeem with a sheep, but you've already redeemed all of the firstborn sheep. Right?
So this would be another one.
Any other one, okay.
Yeah, that's what I would assume.
Yeah. They got a bad rap there.
And was it that
Which were the most necessary animals for them to have in their, for their lifestyle?
Oh, I probably would have gone.
I was just going to bring up that in a different way. What types of work do you have the asses do?
Yeah, but you can eat a sheep. You don't eat your ass. I mean, you eat the ass, and you get milk from a sheep. So I would have thought that the sheep was more valuable than the ass, personally.
But how do you
The ass
grind
is
grain to
working.
make-
The ass is like a tractor. It's something
That's
that when you
right.
are that you move or that it's a working tool.
And also, you would use that if you didn't have people turning the mill for the grain.
Oh, no,
you would be using the work, the workhorse.
I understand the
That's right.
value of the ass, but if I had a choice between an ass and a sheep, I would probably keep the sheep and milk it for, milk and cheese and stuff and eat. That's my personal. Is to plow the
And
field.
clothing.
Yeah, that's my,
But-
anyway.
Yes, it's Suzanne.
Somewhere in what I would call the Old Testament, there is a prophecy that the Messiah is supposed to come riding an ass. Now in the New Testament, it does say that you should do this. So I'm looking at this as thinking that the ass and the lamb are linked. Part of a messianic
Okay,
situation.
interesting point. So, any other comments about that? I don't think we're going to come up with any definitive interpretation.
No, and I didn't read the
Just
last.
take it
sentence
at
of
face
that verse.
value. Maybe that's going to be the most important. Yes,
Right.
Ricky.
I just realized I did not read the last sentence of that verse. If you okay, you must redeem every firstborn among your sons. None shall appear before me empty-handed.
Yes.
Part of that verse.
Okay. And we're going to find
And
out.
incidentally, you could have put an and in there, but it
Oh,
doesn't.
thank you. I can do my back there, but okay, I'll put it in there. And none shall appear before me empty-handed.
So, and we will find out what the redemption process will be in a while.
Okay.
Okay, Ricky, go ahead with the next one.
Okay. 6 days you shall work, but on the 7th day you shall cease from labor. You shall cease from labor even at plowing time and harvest time.
Okay, and also building the temple, as we're going to find out.
Right, yeah.
All work. And any discussion about this? Ricky, read the next one. I know we've discussed that before.
Yeah.
You
You
go
shall
ahead.
observe the feast of weeks of the first fruits of the wheat harvest and the feast of ingathering at the turn of the year. 3 times
Okay,
a year.
that's stop there.
Okay.
Stop there. And what is the Feast of Weeks?
The Feast of Blintzes.
Yeah.
Feast of Blintzes.
Right. Okay.
What has it become?
Shavuot.
Shavuos. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Over time, according to Cloud, Shavuos is also called the festival of the first fruits and was later identified as the festival of the giving of the Torah. And in parenthesis, tradition says it was given on the 6th day of Sivan. Okay. Any other? He also says the Feast of Ingathering
At the turn of the year.
at the turn of the year.
That's
And
Sukkot.
that
That's
would
the
be
fall.
Sukkot.
That's Sukkot.
Right.
That's the fall festival. Right.
Right.
What I found interesting in the United States, and I expect other diaspora places, is that Shavuot is not celebrated as a holiday. Even the Chag Matan Torah, that the Torah was given. And it's a holiday of coming up to Jerusalem. There are 3 times. And this is one of the times. I think that we celebrate more Hanukkah than Shavuot. And I don't know why it evolved to be a not holiday.
I might be getting these confused, but Shavuot, isn't that the holiday where you stay up all night learning? Because this is when we got the Torah, or is that Shavuos? Which one have I got?
Shavuos and Shavuot is the same.
Well, I mean, no. I mean,
And yes, what you're
Shavuot.
referring to is a Tikkun Leil Shavuot, is an overnight study,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
To reenact
That's the Shavuot.
receiving the Torah.
That's which one? That's Shavuot.
That's Shavuot. That's
okay.
that's the Feast of
synagogue,
Weeks. That's
we did
seven.
that.
That's 7 weeks. 7 weeks, 7 weeks and 1 day after Passover.
Okay. Right.
Okay, which in the Christian community is Pentecost, because that's 50
Pentecost,
days
right.
after Easter. Marty, can I kind of
Please.
respond to Rabbi Miri? Also, I'm astonished and disappointed that Shavuot has the observance has fallen off. I know in the Reform, Reconstructionist, conservative communities of North America, if I go back to the 60s and 70s, if not even the 80s, long time ago, it was a very important celebration focused on confirmation, or some congregation called it affirmation. And I mean, the larger temple in Detroit, for example, it was an entire weekend. It was a 3-day observance of confirmation that culminated in the Shavuot festival ceremony, and it was maybe not as important as Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but people, families and cousins and grandparents would come in from out of town to be able to celebrate with the high schoolers and whatever. I don't know what's happened in the last 30-40 years, but it used to be a much more different, obviously, from what the Torah envisioned, and different from the way that agricultural Israel, the modern state of Israel, with Chag HaBikurim, with the first fruits kind of celebration. But Shavuot used to be much more important than it is now, and I don't have an answer as to why it's been diminished.
Just
synagogue
could
in
you,
Connecticut, which is conservative, did do Shavuot, the learning side, but not the affirmation side.
They
And
didn't
that
do
was the
They
that-
didn't do confirmation.
no,
That
but I'm
was
saying
that was
Shavuot wasn't
strictly a North American ceremony, with pageantry, with blessings, with processions, and all that. Now, we know that it started in the Reform movement, because Reform until the 50s had dropped bar and bat mitzvah, or not. Okay, so confirmation was for everyone, a rite of passage into adulthood. Now, maybe that's one of the reasons, is that bar bat mitzvah has supplanted just the celebrations, but and I miss it, because it was when I stood with students. I apologize for taking the discussion in a different direction, but probably when I think back over 46, 47 years of the rabbinate, some of the most meaningful moments that I ever experienced was standing at the Ark individually with a confirmation student, and and spending 2-3 minutes of private blessing with those students, and that just doesn't seem to be happening anymore.
Yeah, because
Thank
if the Torah is given to the Israelites, it's not given only as a community, it's given to you personally.
Right.
And that's what you're addressing.
I
And
mean, we used to
That's right.
do a ceremony where and we did it. It was with 10th graders, and where they would literally swear, take a vow of participation in Jewish adulthood. Under it was four of the students would
Yeah.
hold up a Holocaust scroll, and the rest of the group would stand underneath the Holocaust scroll, and they would take this pledge, so to speak, of Jewish participation. It's a very, very
Right.
moving ceremony.
Agreed. Marsha has had her hand up, and I apologize for butting in a
I'm
little
sorry.
earlier.
That's okay. This is very personal. I grew up in a very conservative synagogue that when you went to Hebrew school at a certain age, the boys got an extra day to study because they were getting ready for their bar mitzvah. But the girls learned on a different level, but they still saw each other. Well, after the 13, or very soon after, the girls had a confirmation, and we studied together. And it was written for us by Shalom Shukunda. And anyway, I remember how important that day was to my grandparents. My grandfather walked a long time to get to our synagogue.
Yep.
Excuse me. And my grandmother made the most latkes with the cream in the middle that I can ever remember, because it was their celebration of a daughter being recognized. And my poor grandparents had 4 granddaughters and no grandson, so I can't remember what they did for them. But I remember how important these bar mitzvahs were for boys in our age, in my age. So there is a good reason that I found an important thing in today's reading. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
In
Marsha.
Israel, this is it's a dairy celebration, just like in Pesach you eat matzah, and in Rosh Hashanah you eat apples with honey. In Shavuot you eat dairy products.
Good. Rabbi, Simchat Torah comes to mind. And maybe you can explain the differences between the two holidays.
Well, Simchat Torah, which is the last day of Sukkot, and in some communities it's an extra day. Some communities it's considered on the 7th day, whatever. But Simchat Torah technically is just when you finish reading through the end of Deuteronomy and then beginning again with Genesis, but taking advantage of that because it usually falls right near the beginning of the school year. So the educators kind of said, okay, excuse the expression, let's piggyback on that and add a celebration of welcoming new students, and then because it's it's a very festive celebration, and marching around with the Torahs, and whatever. There's nothing in the Torah that talks about Simchat Torah. It's a much later kind of festival, and I'm not sure what more you wanted me to say about it, but I think we all have some kind of memory.
No, it's just that what I find the two have in common is turning.
well, and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur also, but different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
everything is
right,
about
turning
that.
right.
That's right. So just as an aside, but thank you very much for that extra input. I appreciate that. And Marcia, thank you very much. That was very important what you brought to the conversation. Any other discussion on this? Okay. Now we have verses, verse 23.
No, 21. Oh, no, sorry. I'm sorry. I don't think we did 24. Oh, you said 23.
23.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was reading. I was missing the numbers. All right, 23. 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the sovereign Lord, the God of Israel. I will drive out nations from your path and enlarge your territory. No one will covet your land when you go up to appear before the Lord your God 3 times a year.
Okay. Now, for verse 23, it's Rabbi Mary's. Let me just see something here.
Nobody can mute her.
I can't, there's no way of doing it. She's on the phone. Anyway, everybody speak louder so everyone else can hear. So what are the 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the sovereign Lord and God of Israel? What is it referring to?
Well, those are the 3 pilgrimage festivals.
Talking about,
right.
yeah.
That's that we just listed.
That we
Okay.
That's
This
right.
is these verses are included as the Torah portion for Shabbat during Passover and Sukkot.
Right.
Because it refers specifically to them.
Very, very good. Okay, so now verse 24. This is where we started our discussion earlier, but verse 24. Rick, David, why don't you read? We'll catch up with you now.
Verse 24, for I will cast out nations before thee and enlarge thy borders, neither shall any man covet thy land. When thou goest up to appear before the Lord thy God 3 times in the year, thou shalt not offer the blood.
Okay, let's stop at that point, David, please.
Stop with the blood.
Any comments about this? It's 23 and 24 and 22, 23, 24 really come together with this. But why is this so important? It's basically saying that, well, if you appear before the Lord your God 3 times a year, this is what I'm going to do for you. Any comments?
Well, you don't have to worry about leaving your house. It's not like you're going, over to just crossing over La Cañada Road and go to the temple. I mean, this is probably a 3, 4, 5 day journey to get to Jerusalem or to get wherever the shrine would be. And God is saying, I'm going to make sure that there are no enemies who would come and take your property while you're gone.
Okay.
So you can
So
have the right, you can be totally focused on your sacrifice, totally focused on your pilgrimage, and not have to worry about what's happening back home.
Good point. Any other comments? Okay. If somebody would care to read verse 25.
Verse 25.
Yeah.
Okay. Thou shalt not, we'll go back to the blood. Thou shalt not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread. Neither shall the sacrifice to the feast of Passover be left unto the morning. The choice,
Okay, any comments about that?
they want you to start in the evening.
Okay, that's a good point. But so what is being said here? What is the blood of the of my sacrifice?
Well, that would be the lamb, right? The
Okay,
Marty,
please, yes, Suzanne.
for me, leaven is a symbol of sin, because it
Okay,
can yeast can multiply so quickly and almost out of control, so to speak. So if God is saying to the Israelites, no leavening for what was it, 7 days, and it had to be gone out of the house, then it would be going against his word to do a sacrifice with leavening.
okay. So this pertains, as it says, to the Passover, and it's like an admonition to just eat the matzah, the unleavened bread. Do not eat the usual mundane leavened bread, if you will. It's something special that you have to be sure to follow. What about the Passover meal being left lying until morning? You have to complete it.
Also, I think this is the first time where God is telling us that a festival begins not at sunrise when we wake up, but at the sunset of the evening before. And that is the basis of which all of the Jewish festivals begin, from Yom Kippur to all the others. And I believe this is the first time in Scripture where it is specifically told to us.
Good point. Good point. Any other comments? Yes, Suzanne.
This is my germaphobe side, but I see this statement and I think bacteria and spoiled food.
Yeah.
So maybe God is telling them, you don't know what bacteria is at this point in time, but trust me, you don't want to eat, things that are left out, because it's going to make you sick.
No 5-second rule.
No 5-second rule.
5-hour rule. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Ricky or David, either one. Verse 26.
The choice fruits of your soul you shall bring to the house of the Lord your God. You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. And we know
Okay. You've heard some of this before. What about the first fruits?
Oh, I was going to comment on the second part.
Okay. Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
I heard somebody with the interpretation that this is not what the rabbis decided with mixing milk with meat, but that the kid in its mother's milk, you're really killing 2 generations. So you're could be wiping out a species by doing this, because you're killing, the mother and the child. But if you eat the mother, the child should go free, so that the child could continue the species. I mean, that was just another interpretation, and I like that one.
But this doesn't say that the mother has been killed.
I know, I realized that as I was talking, but that was, I'm
Yeah.
citing somebody else's
Okay,
interpretation of it.
Okay. Suzanne?
Yeah, somewhere along the way, I read that this was a pagan practice. And that's why it was put in there, so that to keep the Israelites from doing something pagan. I can't remember which group of pagans, but it was a pagan practice about the kid in the mother's milk.
You mean intentionally?
Yeah,
They-
would, and
That
then
they would
throw it on
they would bring the meat of the kid to be prepared in the milk of the mother, or just coincidentally?
No, they would do it, and then they would take this mixture, and it had something to do with spreading it out over their fields for the next crop.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I
I
can't
hadn't
remember
heard
which.
that before.
which-
That is
No, I've
very
never heard that.
interesting.
Oh, I brought it up before in Torah study, way back when.
I had forgotten about it.
Way
Oh,
back
golly.
when.
But there are
Several
recipes
years.
that will purposely marinate some meat in milk to, as a marinade. I mean, as a softener.
Tenderizer.
It tenderizes,
Yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
yes.
So we got to eat the
Um,
tough meat, not the tenderized meat.
And
Or use tomatoes. That tenderizes too.
it's interesting as to how this developed into, kashrut
Right.
cooking, if you will. But there are two other things that come to mind. It doesn't say in a mother's milk. It's the mother of the kid. Okay.
Right.
So it would be the calf of the cow.
Mhm.
Okay. And we discussed some of this. This one I do remember when we were talking about it. Is it because of when we even are going to take eggs out of a nest? If I recall, if we were to shoo away the mother,
So it doesn't see.
so that the mother doesn't suffer,
Mhm.
the mother would still be alive if it happened to sense that its calf or the kid would be boiled in the mother's milk. Does that have anything to do with a higher order of things, not hurting someone inadvertently or something that you're causing the mother to suffer?
Well, sure. As a general, go from minor to major.
Yes.
From right. That this is the kind of awareness that we can be, that some of our actions have consequences, and even this kind of this kind of a thing. So to be humane,
Mm-hmm.
it's not saying don't boil a kid, like you're saying. It's not don't boil a kid in milk. It's not saying that. It's saying don't in the mother's milk. It could go on
Right.
and say so that the mother would see it, but that's the assumption of the problem.
It's not just see, it's hear and also
Right?
smell.
Yeah, or you're right. With sense. Mm-hmm.
The mother would sense all of that, and so you would be harming the parent. Yes. Please, Don.
Yeah, That's very interesting. It also seems to me at this point of so many centuries of detachment, and these are very specific instructions of ritual that we can barely relate to. I mean, they all invite speculation. We
Oh, of
actually
course.
have no idea what the original intent was. But it does help us bubble up all kinds of thoughts about morality and practices and so on. But I think in the end, we can't ever really know the origins or the original intentions of all these details. But it's fun.
Okay.
It's fun discussing.
Yeah, that's
Right.
this is another blank space. Yes, Rabbi.
I would just say the same thing, and we know that there was an editing process, so you start to speculate a little bit of what was left out.
Hmm.
Okay, we used to do
That's right.
that experiment with some of the high school kids also. To take a couple of phrases like this, and what do you think was edited out,
Right.
and for what purpose?
That's right. Maybe it's to make us stop and think and do this very thing rather than being too specific. I have no idea. Anyway, we've reached the 12 o'clock point, and if there are
Good
any
stopping point.
announcements, Ricky, do you have any
Um,
announcements for us?
Well, the book club is this week. It's Wednesday, reading The Sunflower. And let's see, that's what I know of let me get my calendar up, but that one I have.
And
We've got-
while you're looking it up, I know the rabbi,
Yeah,
by the way, Sue enjoyed your class
There's
tremendously.
class,
Thank you.
Thursday's
So
class.
yeah, the next Thursday would be there's the Hebrew class, beginning Hebrew class, as well as the I didn't learn that in Sunday school kind of
Right.
class.
The board meeting is on Monday at 10
But
o'clock.
that's just for the people who are involved in the play. That's Monday it's not Monday, it's Tuesday. And it's
No,
just for the
Monday is
people.
our general board meeting.
I thought you said the Purim meeting. Okay.
No, board
Meeting is Monday.
Wednesday's the book club. Thursday, your classes.
Friday's a
Saturday,
service.
and Sunday is bagel breakfast.
Right. And then a week from Monday is Purim.
It is? Wait a minute.
Yep, March 6th.
Is that the Hamantashen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
I
Four
love
o'clock
those.
in the afternoon is Purim, followed by Hamantashen.
I love them.
What time is the Purim thingy?
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
2 o'clock?
4.
4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Gotcha. Purim.
Okay.
Well,
Yes,
Got it.
Marcia.
I know we're closing and I want to do a little thank you. I've been sitting in on these sessions for many, many years, and it doesn't end that I walk out of it feeling I'm different. So I thank all of you for keeping it up and letting us keep this mind open. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But you participate and you offer a lot to us too.